Dragon Ball Z and Godzilla are two IPs that I've mixed up and fused together multiple times now. When was the last time I did with Heisei Godzilla? Why don't I mix it up and use a character who's not quite as strong as him, but still very strong in his own right, being Showa Godzilla. I think this matchup is a lot better than using Heisei Godzilla because, for starters, the 70s hero variant of the character is a lot closer in line to someone like Goku on both a morally and character level. So why not for today, let's bench Goku and see if the King of Monsters could stand up against perfect organisms, tyrannical dictators, as well as primordial forces of chaos. I want to preface this video by saying that I won't be using any cross-reference methods for Showa Godzilla or super high-end scaling for any one particular Dragon Ball Z arc. I'm going to try to approach this on a consistent level for both ends, so you're not going to have Saiyan Saga level characters getting all the way up to Soul System level. Yes, I do know how to do that now. But anyways, I know what you're thinking. Goji-Chronic scaling Dragon Ball Z without using high-end arguments? Crazy, I know, but don't worry. I've elected to ask a friend for help on this video, being the one and only TY Dynamo. Bro scales Dragon Ball Z inverse, and he's an expert on the consistent ends. He'll be tackling the Dragon Ball Z stuff, and I got y'all with the Godzilla stuff as always. So yeah, surprise, today's my first collab on the channel. So anyways, I'm gonna stop yapping and hand the mic off to my boy and let him cook with the Dragon Ball inverse. I'll see you guys in a minute. I got you guys, but there's one more thing I have to talk about. And that's because we have to acknowledge today's sponsor, DBZ Collectibles. If you clicked on this video, it's safe to say that you have at least some mild interest in Godzilla, more specifically Showa Godzilla. And I mean, who wouldn't? He's the GOAT, but merch for this guy is pretty hard to find, mostly due to the fact that his series has been over for decades. But that's where today's sponsor, Beast of the East, has us covered. These guys were kind enough to send me this Showa Godzilla figure. And to put it frankly, this guy's incredible. From someone who had to grow up with Showa figures like this, the figures provided by these guys are really an atomic breath of fresh air. No, I'm not going to take that back, and I'm not sorry for the pun. If you would find yourself interested in this Showa figure or any of their wide variety of kaiju products, the first link in the description will take you right to the website. Thank you, Beast of the East Collectibles, for sponsoring today's video. And with that out of the way, TY Dynamo, let's get into the Dragon Ball scaling.
What's good, guys? Thank you, Goji, for having me here. If you like Dragon Ball scaling such as this, please be sure to check out my channel and subscribe for more Dragon Ball. With all that said, let's get straight to the scaling, man. The Saiyan Saga shows some insane displays of power from the start of the series, such as the well-known moon-destroying feat that Piccolo displayed in the early parts of the arc, which should go without saying is moon level. It's self-explanatory. But what you may not know is how much more impressive this feat could be if you calc how quickly and how vast explosions that was created will require 5.62 times 10 to the 34 joules, which is a really big number. This will require energy that exerts about the large planetary levels of energy, and he did this while waiting. The time that it took Piccolo's beam to reach the moon took about a little over 2 seconds if you want to use the anime, which if we go about the distance between the Earth and the moon, we will be reaching speeds around the relativistic tiers of speed. This would scale back to the big bad himself, Vegeta, as his power compared to Piccolo's weighted power level being 408, if we assume Piccolo was ever going all out to begin with, compared to Vegeta's baseline of 18,000 power level and his 180,000 power level. If you consider the 10 times increase from grade 8, we would get an increase of 44 to 440 times difference in power that Vegeta will output in comparison to Piccolo. This will get us the speeds over FTL and AP being way higher into the large planetary to possible star level ranges if you consider the math of the higher end. But if you want to be more realistic in the approach so early on with the series, large planetary levels of energy would be the output of the power that this terrifying Saiyan Prince would be utilizing. But with all that said, let's see how Godzilla stacks against this level of power so early on in the series.
Showa Godzilla has a plethora of ways to match the large planetary to dwarf star levels of power shown in early Dragon Ball, but the easiest way to get him to that level of power is simply by scaling him to Ghidorah, who has shown relative consistency in that tier of power. This is mostly because Ghidorah is consistently stated to be a planet killer slash destroyer, and in his introductory film, he was stated to have destroyed the planet Venus in the blink of an eye, though I want to note that it was a surface wipe, as we actually get to see Venus way later in the canon show Zone Fighter, and it's basically a dead planet or wasteland. So you might think that he's just merely a surface wipe so multi-continental, but this isn't actually the case, as his gravity beams work and destroy matter on a subatomic level, meaning that things that are seemingly unimpressive like a surface wipe can go from multi-continental to anywhere from 5.94 yotatons to as high as 58.15 ninatons, which is anywhere from large planetary to dwarf star level. Godzilla scales to this as he can literally endure these very same gravity beams and not die, so due to Newton's third law, his attack potency would simply scale relative to his durability. As for speed, now you can easily get this Godzilla in the same relativistic to FTL plus category as the Saiyans, because even as early as during the events of Godzilla Raids Again, he would scale to Anguirus, who could dodge his atomic breath, which is stated to be a beam of light. Godzilla gets stronger as well as faster throughout the entire Showa era as a whole, so seeing how this is literally the weakest and by proxy slowest Godzilla has ever been, I don't think it's too crazy to say that he would get around to FTL plus at his peak. These attack potency and speed ends are pretty much the highest ends you can get for Saiyan Saga level characters, while they're relatively low ends for Showa Godzilla Godzilla, so with that in mind, it's safe to say that he would move on.
The Namek Saga is where we get into the really nutty territory of power clipping that puts the Saiyan Saga to shame in comparison. We have a shocking increase of speed displayed so early on in the arc, which is from Goku being seen reacting and dodging inside of an asteroid field when he was outside of his spaceship when arriving to Namek. This is impressive considering the speeds that Goku would have to react in relation to the shield itself, considering that the spaceship is faster than Bulma's, and Bulma's took about a month to get to Namek, with speeds already showcasing that it can reach from Earth to Jupiter in approximately 5 seconds. The speed would acquire about 576 times the speed of light. Since it took Goku only 6 days in comparison to Bulma's 1 month to travel to Namek, we would get a whopping 2,881 times the speed of light when comparing the speeds, and this would be considered a low ball due to not calculating the actual distance from Earth to Namek, but rather just the time it took itself. Going on to AP, we start with Frieza in his first form, displaying his signature supernova, destroying Planet Vegeta. Planet Vegeta possesses at least 10 times more gravity than that of Earth and reduces it to atoms in only a matter of seconds. Such a feat will require around 2.04 times 10 to the 40 joules, which would be calculated at around Dwarfstar's level of energy. Frieza would get 226 times more powerful. If we scale the difference between his first form's 530,000 power level to his full power of 120 million, we would get at around the large star level ranges of power. But something more interesting to note is that these characters could be much stronger than this when attributing the anime, as Frieza at critical health was able to survive the explosion of Namek, which is seen engulfing a large portion of a distant galaxy. This would require multi-solar systems levels of energy to output. If you consider all of this, we truly see how much of a powerful monster Frieza is, even while on the brink of death. Let's see how our giant lizard boy stacks up against the terrifying evil emperor of the universe.
In order to match the star levels of power found in the Namek Saga, one would have to bring up the Garago from Zone Fighter, and more specifically their planet-busting nuclear bombs. One may think this is merely planetary, but once you consider that the planet is likely a gas giant, as it's shown to have rings, and when it explodes it literally turns into gas, then yeah, stack that on top of the fact that this planet was effectively vaporized, and it's been determined that the bomb would be equivalent to 6.2 foes, which is large star level. The Garago have confirmed that their Terror Beasts are the most powerful weapons, meaning they would simply upscale gas giant vaporizing bombs, and Godzilla can literally ragdoll them and rip them apart, meaning that Godzilla at least is large star level. But in order to get him to solar system level, once again, you would have to scale him off of Ghidorah, as Ghidorah can convert cosmic rays into energy. For context, cosmic rays literally come from supernovas, or, sun explosions. So when calculated, it's been found that Ghidorah has energy equivalent to anywhere from as low as 107 to as high as 232 kilovolts, which is around solar system level either way you look at it. The Showa era has ridiculous power cliffs with quantifiable lower ends suggesting that the power gap is in the tens of thousands, and with higher ends estimating that the power gap is in the tens of millions. I don't want to bore you with all that, so in the description I found a thread that said that Godzilla gets 36,000 times stronger over the Showa era, so you can just use that. Now moving on to speed, and it comes from Ghidorah once again, who can literally traverse galaxies in seconds while in space, with calculations asserting that he would be flying at 20 billion times faster than the speed of light. You may think this is only travel speed, but during the events of Zone Fighter, Zone was able to fight on par with him while flying in this mode as well as in space, so none of y'all can say he's slower in the atmosphere, as Zone has shown relativity to him in space. I want to add on that the gravity beams were also explicitly shown to be faster than Ghidorah's flight speed in space, the same beams that show Godzilla could react to point blank. Godzilla would also scale to this via scaling to Zone Fighter, who he can spar with. So in conclusion, I think it's safe to say with the casual stellar AP and the MFTL plus fighting speed, it's safe to say that Godzilla would move on.
Moving on to the Cell Saga, the Z fighters have increased their powers dramatically in preparation for the android threat. Threats so powerful that they make Frieza look like nothing in comparison to their strength, even when he was powered up by 10 times the level he was on Namek. This is shown as Trunks easily destroys him and still thinks that the androids are unimaginably more powerful compared to what we've seen before. We see the massive power difference between the Z fighters against androids 16, 17, and 18, and eventually Cell, which forces the Saiyans into reaching a new level of Super Saiyan, which is important for scaling a bit later. Vegeta, after a year of training, transforms into a Super Vegeta state, aka Grade 2 Super Saiyan. Super Vegeta was shown bullying semi-perfect Cell easily, and for Vegeta to surpass his level of strength, he would have to at least be 2 times stronger, considering how Android 17 was already stronger than Vegeta, and Cell by proxy was also stronger than Vegeta. Assuming Cell's absorptions are only additive, it would mean Vegeta would have to multiply his strength by at least 2 times as a low ball for calculation's sake. Cell, after being pushed against a wall, strategically convinces Vegeta to eventually achieve his perfect form, And with this new power, completely manhandles him without ever trying, and also does the same against Super Trunks, whom with his grade 3 Super Saiyan strength being at least 10 times greater than that of Vegeta. If we are using El Manga Legendario, this will make Cell over hundreds of times stronger casually while not even using half his strength, considering how Goku himself far surpassed both Vegeta and Trunks with his own 50% strength, doubling that value even higher than before, which would get us to around the possible galaxy levels of range if we add all of these numbers up. Cell proceeds to get even stronger in this super perfect state and threatens to destroy the entire solar system in one Kamehameha. This new Cell is at least 2 times greater than if we go off the statement that he received a power up like Gohan's, which is at least a 2 times increase, using the Super Saiyan 2 multiplier being stated 2 times that of Super Saiyan when using the super exciting guy. We've been using a lot of 2s so far, but all in all, this makes Cell an incredible, terrifying, fearsome beast to fight against. But let's see how Godzilla can hold his own against the perfect warrior.
Thanks, Dynamo. And in order to match the galactic power of Perfect Cell, I want to take the time to talk about Godzilla's Universal Plus scaling. As Godzilla scales to Zone, and Zone Fighter could destroy a net that could create a 4th dimensional construct, which in supplementary material is equated to a world or universe in terms of size, granting Zone Fighter Universal Plus scaling. Zone would go on to fight a creature named Jerko, who he beat relatively easily in base, but he would return later on in the series where he was stated to be 100 times stronger than before. And Zone Fighter was still able to beat him, meaning that Zone Fighter would upscale his base that could destroy 4th dimensional spaces over 100 times over. Later on, the Gargo would create a car that is 10,000 times more durable than Zone Fighter himself, but don't worry, our heroes had a car compactor that could also destroy that car. Since Zone got 100 times stronger since his Universal Plus showcase, and the car and compactor upscale him by 10,000 times over, these constructs would unironically be 1,000,000 times stronger than Zone Fighter when he performed his first Universal Plus feat. This is important because Ghidorah is stated to be the most powerful being in the entire universe, as well as having the most powerful weapons in the universe via his gravity beams. Godzilla's skills to Ghidorah as weaker kaiju than himself could draw blood from him and even break its back. This scaling chain relies on Ghidorah upscaling current Zone, but you might think, didn't Zone Fighter beat Ghidorah? Well, actually, he beat a weaker second generation Ghidorah, and the OG Ghidorah who all these statements apply to isn't even in the same show, so yeah. So it's safe to say that Godzilla would be able to casually beat Perfect Cell due to just scaling higher. To put Godzilla's power into perspective, Perfect Cell has multiple infinite power / universal implications, and even if you granted Cell this scaling, he would still lose to Godzilla, as Perfect Cell has infinite energy on a 3rd dimensional level, while Showa Godzilla is literally on a different tier of dimensionality, as well as upscaling that dimensionality over 1,000,000 times over. So with this being said, let's head on to the next arc.
The Majin Buu arc is filled to the brim with many powerful warriors and incarnations of Buu, but before we get into Buu himself, let's talk about the 7 years of training that Goku did so rigorously, which caused him to be leaps and bounds stronger than he was since the Cell games. But before those many years of training, Goku follows the North Kaio to Grand Kaio's planet and meets the Grand Kaio himself. After a brief conversation, Goku meets the West Kaio and his galaxy's strongest warrior Pikkon. The Grand Kaio brings news that Frieza and Cell are causing trouble in Hell and orders Pikkon to beat them up and stop the threat, meaning that he believes Pikkon is capable of defeating a Cell level threat himself. Goku is obviously very skeptical of the idea that Pikkon could ever do it alone, and soon follows Pikkon while traveling from Grand Kaio's planet down to Hell itself. This is a very ridiculous display of speed that is severely underlooked when considering the massive distance that Goku and Pikkon would have had to travel in such a short array of time. If we look at the diagram of the cosmology, we see Grand Kaio's planet is seen as being a bit higher than heaven itself in the placement in the afterlife. This would mean that Goku and Pikkon travel downwards from Grand Kaio's planet, passing through heaven and eventually to Hell. Heaven is stated to be the size of the observable universe itself, which means that they would have to travel across essentially universal distances to eventually go down to Hell itself. If we assume that it took them about 10 minutes to travel as a lowball, considering that it's heavily implied it only took them mere moments, they would have traveled 10.7 sextillion times faster than light while casually. This number becomes frighteningly larger if you believe in the statements that the observable universe is infinite in size, meaning that Goku and Pikkon displayed infinite speeds getting there. Pikkon is shown two-tapping Cell, who's as strong, if not even stronger than he was when he fought Gohan, based on statements from the Daizenshu. Goku is amazed that an opponent like Pikkon could ever exist, and pushes Goku to try and keep up with this new wall of power to overcome. Goku throughout the tournament improves and adapts every fight, which leads to him eventually being on the level of Pikkon himself while just in base, which means that Goku far exceeds that Galaxy Plus level range of power just in his base form alone. and soon after gives Pikkon a good fight and wins in a battle full power, with many more years to improve from that point on, mastering his abilities and unlocking new forms of Super Saiyan. This would of course scale back to the likes of Majin Buu, considering how Goku thinks that in his Super Saiyan 2 form, he wouldn't be much of a match against Buu, which forces him into using his Super Saiyan 3 form, and gives Buu a fairly good fight. Buu this time is consistently hyped up as being a threat to the entire universe, and a casual galaxy buster in many guides, which is consistent for him to be placed around this multi-galaxy to possibly universal levels of strength, depending on who you ask. But we know that doesn't stop there, as Buu progresses to get multiple times more powerful, with his absorptions turning into Super Buu. Buu tanks Buuhan. Super Buu shows a crazy feat of being able to scream his way out of dimensions via his Vice Shout, which was shown in his fight against Gotenks, and then later on in a higher degree as Buuhan, which is stated that he would have destroyed the universe itself via opening several alternate dimensions, entering in, and eventually crushing the universe itself, depending on who you ask, due to the nature of ripping holes through space-time and eventually making them become one by breaking the walls that separated them entirely. This would require a low multiversal level of energy, but the arguments surrounding it are a bit much and heavily debated on, so Buuhan can range from the universal to possible low multiversal levels of power, depending on who you ask. If you believe that Kid Buu is stronger than Buuhan from the multiple strongest Majin statements thrown around in guides and anime, this would of course scale back to Kid Buu himself, but if you don't agree with that, Kid Buu is consistently hyped up as being this universal level threat if he wasn't defeated against his battle against Goku. But all in all, with all that being said, how does Godzilla fare against this nightmare of an opponent that is Majin Buu?
Thanks Dynamo for helping me with the final arc of this video, and I think overall this is where you either think Showa Godzilla solos or loses. And unfortunately, I think it's more likely that he loses, because Dynamo presented infinite speed arguments as well as just higher tech potency ends for this part of Dragon Ball Z that Showa Godzilla on a consistent level has no real scaling to get him that high. The only way to get Showa Godzilla that high is downscaling off of Heisei Godzilla, who he's confirmed to be 200 times weaker than. And as funny as it sounds, being 200 times weaker than Heisei Godzilla is still higher than Universal Plus, but you know, it's not consistent. It's crossverse stuff. There's also some stuff that says that Marvel Godzilla is Showa Godzilla, so one could argue that Showa Godzilla has scaling to Marvel Comics, but that's crossverse stuff, and I don't think it's really indicative of the product of the original Showa era. I'm trying to keep it to that era specifically, and using just stuff in the Showa era, Showa Godzilla has no speed feats that are on par with Infinite Speed, and at best he's around Universal Plus. He's pretty deep into it, but being really deep into Universal Plus is still being really weaker than, you know, low multiversal. So in conclusion, even though Godzilla made a pretty deep run into Dragon Ball Z, he would stop at Buu Saga more than likely. Before I dip out, I'd like to thank my co-host TY Dynamo. Be sure to check his channel out. I'm gonna pin whatever he comments in the comment section whenever he sees this, so yeah, be sure to support his channel. He really helped me with this video. He's an up and coming power scaler, and let's get him to like 500 subs by, I don't know, whenever y'all can do that, you know, preferably today, but you know, I'm gonna pin his comment, so I'll leave it up to y'all. But anyways, I'll see you guys next week, but until then, stay big G fans.